I recommend clinical trials 100% of the time if a patient is deemed eligible. The eligibility for clinical trials tend to be relatively strict in that we have to make sure that patients don't have a whole lot of other what we call comorbid conditions or other illnesses that are going to potentially impact how well they can tolerate the treatment that we're trying to prescribe. But we make a really big effort to make sure that we have clinical trials available for all the different stages of esophageal cancers. For example, if somebody is going to get chemotherapy and radiation therapy, we have a clinical trial for that. If somebody is going to have straight surgery and not have chemotherapy or radiation therapy before, we have a clinical trial for that scenario. And for the patients who have cancer that has spread in the metastatic setting, we have what we call frontline clinical trials where patients who have received no prior therapies, we have a clinical trial for them. And for patients who have had what we call first-line chemotherapy or immunotherapy, and the cancers have progressed despite that treatment, we have something for them beyond that as well. So we tend to have a variety of clinical trials that are ongoing, and we take a lot of time to oversee the clinical trial portfolio to make sure that almost any patient who shows up to our cancer center, we have a clinical trial for them. Clinical trials also allow us to provide tomorrow's therapy today. Multiple studies have shown us that the best cancer care occurs while patients are on clinical trials. It has been proven over and over again. When our patients are participating in a clinical trial, not only are they receiving the care from their doctor and nurse and the nurses that are providing the infusion, but also there's a research team assigned to that patient to make sure that the side effects are being monitored of this new drug, making sure that the new drug is being given on time and over the appropriate infusion times. And so you generally get more attention as a patient on a clinical trial than a patient on receiving the standard of care treatment. In most clinical trials nowadays, patients are going to get the standard of care, or they'll get standard of care plus. It'll be the standard of care plus some new drug or some new approach that's being added to the standard of care, but that's being compared to the standard of care. So in general, patients are not getting anything less than the standard of care. They could get more, but they're not going to get any less than the standard of care. Multiple studies have also shown us that the reason why patients don't participate in clinical trials is because either their doctor didn't talk about them or the doctor didn't have access to them. So overall, only about 5% of patients participate in clinical trials, and that's very low. Most of the times when they have studied these things, if patients are approached about clinical trials, about 50% of them will actually participate. They just have to know about it. The best time to qualify for a clinical trial is when you haven't had any prior therapy. When you're newly diagnosed, that's when the most clinical trial options are available to you. Once you started, the options become fewer. And so that's the important time when a patient needs to consider whether they want to do a clinical trial or not, and whether they should seek a second opinion or not. Once treatment has started, the second opinions are still of value, but the clinical trial options will be drastically reduced.